Flat. It really is. Very nice. Like Texas. Midwestern people. Omaha, Nebraska. 10,000 Lovely people. Lovely people. It's a different world. It's a very different world, yeah. Lovely, lovely people.
We want to find out if the story of keeping the faith was actually true.
If the story of that what?
He said he was keeping the faith, and the argument against Stiller is based upon him. How much of that was true?
It's about a priest and a rabbi, you know.
He said it was based on him.
Tom Cruise.
So did you watch it last week?
Just a little bit. I understand he got a little emotional. He's a wonderful teacher. Good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. It's all right. They're Jews. They want to schmooze. It's healthy. It's good for you to schmooze. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. I hope everybody is well. Thank you for welcoming Rabbi Gelman last week. I watched a little bit of the videotape. He's a great teacher and has a lot to say. So thank you for being so kind. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, where people are kind and good and wonderful, and the land is flat, and it was a wonderful place. It's a lovely community. Following our learning this morning, you're all invited to any number of services in the building. There's a library minyan upstairs. There's a regular minyan in the Sher Lapati. There's a Tat Shabbat and a kids minyan. And then following that, we'll have lunch, and it's a lovely lunch. It's in honor of Sammy Offsay's Ufruf today. Sammy's getting married next week, and her family's giving a lovely lunch for her Ufruf. And then at 12:30, back in Sher Lapati, I have a special afternoon program today, a Shabbat Shiur. Mrs. Barron, Michelle Barron, that's Cantor Phil's wife, is an important film, is a drama director, and has been working in theater for many, many, many years. And one of her expertise is in theater of the deaf. She's worked a tremendous amount with deaf communities, developing theater and developing drama. And she's begun a research project on the fate of deaf people during the Holocaust. Deaf people were one of the communities that Hitler and the Nazis targeted. And there isn't anything that she could find to tell these stories that haven't been told. So she has received a grant and support from the United States Holocaust Museum to put together an exhibition about the fate of deaf people during the Shoah. And she's begun this research, gathered many, many interesting testimonies and stories, and is going to present that for us this afternoon at 12:30 in Sher Lapati. So grab some lunch and come down the hall and share that with us. It's a very, very important conversation, very important research, and a very interesting story. Very interesting story. That's today. Of course, wish you a lovely and quiet weekend. On Wednesday night, we continue with College of Jewish Studies. This year, we're looking at the great debates, the controversies that shaped Judaism. For those of you not with us, last week, we put the prophet Jeremiah on trial. A brilliant prosecutor tried to throw the poor guy in jail, but lucky for him, he had a better defense attorney, and he was acquitted quite, summarily, actually. So this week we're going to be taking up an issue which begins in the Bible and continues through the Talmudic tradition all the way into modernity. It's the question of whether Jews should welcome outsiders, whether there should be boundaries and borders about Jewish identity and Jewish community, or whether the Jewish community should be wary of outsiders and not be willing to accept outsiders. Our guest is going to be Rabbi Adam Greenwald, who teaches at the AJU. He's the head of the Introduction to Judaism program at the AJU. Morning, Mike. And hi, you're still here. Yay. Give this woman 2 seats. Wow, Mazel Tov. B'shad Tova, you know. So Adam will be teaching us on Wednesday evening, so please come enjoy that. Next weekend, next Friday night in Shabbos, we have a scholar in residence with us in the synagogue, the great cantor Israel Rand. Cantor Rand is the cantor, the renowned cantor of the great synagogue of Tel Aviv, and international star. A beautiful, beautiful voice, of course, and a deep scholar of Jewish music. And he'll be our guest. He'll do a Farbringen on Friday night, which means we'll have a short service at around 7:30, and beginning at 8 o'clock, he and Cantor Fox will do a little concert together and a conversation. In the morning, he'll be with us. We'll do Torah study next week, but in the after shul, he'll have a conversation with us about his experiences. He's been all over the world performing as a cantor, and a wonderful guy. So that's next Shabbos. That's cantor Israel Rand, world-class cantor, and we'll have a chance to enjoy him. And that's all I can remember at the moment. After that, then the week after that, there's Tamarim, our Sephardic service, and then the week after that's Thanksgiving. So we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. Did I leave anything out? If I did, I apologize. But I think that's most of the important stuff. You have the Shabbaton, so it has all the important stuff written there. Okay. If you have a Chumash, we're in chapter 12 of Genesis on page 69. If you don't have a Chumash, we can go get some. Other Chumashim? Okay. Good. Good. Welcome. Come on in. Make yourself at home. Yes, please. 69. 69. Genesis 12. Genesis 12. We welcome everybody sitting in their pajamas at home. So one of these Shabbos is I'm going to come in my pajamas. So if you can watch me in your pajamas, I'm going to watch me in my pajamas. Yeah. So basically, the structure of Genesis, I think, is a drama in 3 acts. We're introduced at the beginning of Genesis to God, and what we know about this God is 2 things. This God creates a world, and this God has dreams for that world, and wants a partner, wants very much to have a partner to share this world. So God creates a man, human being, puts him in paradise, gives him instructions, and says, be my partner. And man betrays him, because man chooses individuation over his role as God's partner. He wants to control his own destiny. He chooses the tree of knowledge of good and evil so that he can navigate his own world. He chooses individuation. We all choose individuation. We all break away from our parents at some point and become the people we're meant to be, right? I apologize for being so both televisionic and cinematic, but if you remember, there was a TV ad many, many years ago where a woman turns to her mother and says, please, Mom, I want to do it myself. Remember that ad? I'd rather do it myself. That's classic human development. At some point, all of us, we love our parents, we revere our parents, we learn from our parents, but we have to make our own mistakes and choose our own path in the world. So man says, I choose out, and he enters the world and fills the world with that attitude, and that fills the world with violence and with pain, because if it's only about me and mine, and it's not about you and yours, then there's a fundamental brokenness to the world. And at the end of Act 1, the world is so broken, God gives up and says, I want nothing more to do with this. I'm going to destroy it all. And just before he destroys it all, he sees one human being with moral potential. This man is Noach. And he says, I'll save him, and I'll save a sampling of the life on the planet and start all over again. And there's a great flood that washes the world clean, and Noach begins again. But once again, the same cycle, because human beings are human beings. And the same cycle recurs, and the world gets filled again with corruption. So now we have God who says, look, I couldn't choose a human being. I couldn't create a human being to be a partner. I couldn't choose a human being to be a partner. Maybe I can enlist one. I can teach one. I can recruit a human being, strip him, cleanse him of his background, of his culture, of his assumptions about life, and send him into the world as my partner. And that's where we are today. So there is a long, long midrashic tradition in Jewish and other traditions as well, in the Islamic and Christian tradition, about why Abraham was chosen. I want to submit the opposite case, though. I think he was chosen because his name started with an A. I think he happened to be the first guy standing in line at the DMV, I think it was random. I mean, to me, the purpose of the narrative is to say, I couldn't choose one, I couldn't create one. If I just pick somebody, let me see if I can make him into my partner. And that's the great story that begins today. This is the beginning of the Jewish people. So God says to him, Lech Lecha. Whenever you have a verb that's repeated this way, it means it's an intensification, like get going. Lech Lecha, go. God said to Abram, go. Me'artzecha mimoladetcha mibeit avicha. 3 words, from your land, from your home, your birthplace, from the house of your father. I want you to leave behind the culture that has shaped you. I want you to leave behind the identity that you hold. I want you to leave your American Express card behind. Okay? Leave home without it. I promise you it'll be okay. Ela aretz asher areka, to the place I'm going to show you. Which is kind of strange, because usually if you tell someone to go someplace, you tell them where they're going. But here it's, I'll show you. Start going and I'll show you. Right? Have you ever asked for directions in Israel? They say, Yashar, 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 V'shama Tishan Mishu. Start driving, and when you get there, ask somebody. It's like, what kind of directions are these, It's Meshuggah, right? So he says, go, because, and the reason, and you can see why, if you have just a bit of a poetic sensitivity to this, it's because his destination is indeterminate yet. We know the direction he's going to move in, but we don't know where he's going to end up. We don't know where this experiment's going to end up. This experiment of the Jewish people, or this experiment of humanity. Where is it going to end up? I'm going to go, and I'll show you in which way you're going, but I can't tell you where you're going to end up. Billy, yeah?
Can't you make a case that Torah actually started?
Yeah, Michael's talked about this if you looked at previous chapter, Terach, who's his father, starts in Ur of the Chaldees, which is a great Mesopotamian metropolis, and is on his way to Canaan and gets arrested. He gets stopped in Haran, which is Haran. Haran's like Dodge City. It's this dusty cow town, It's all the westerns we ever watched as kids, how did a nice girl end up in a town like that, and or in Star Wars, it's that planet where Luke Skywalker lives in the beginning, it's this dusty, weird place with bars full of weird-looking people. That's Haran. It's a caravan stop. All right, Shechianu, Vikiyamanu, it says cool 32. No, I don't think we wanted 32. No, I don't think it's Celsius. Although that's a good try, Billy. That was a good try. I fixed it. It'll get really warm in a minute. So he gets, so Abraham in a certain way is continuing the family journey on their way to Canaan. That's one way to think about it. But I think that the Torah is purposely breaking the story here and opening up a new chapter. So I like to think of this as coming out of nowhere, right? Which raises all sorts of interesting questions, like so God shows up in your life and says, I need you to do something radical. How do you know it's God? How do you know it's not your own impulses? And how does it, who is this God? They don't know each other. A voice comes to, how does it come to him? Is it a voice? Is it an impulse? Right? So someone has a question. Yes, please. Haran, yeah.
When you said about the town,
Yeah.
it made me think of my family came from Lithuania.
Yeah.
And my Hebrew teacher used to say, oh, your Zadie came from Kamai. That was like an old western town.
Yeah.
Wild West.
Wild Western
And
Lithuania.
If you knew my grandfather, you knew he was joking because he was such a firm man.
You're a Western Litvak, right? That's why I wear 2 pairs of tefillin, That's the truth, partner, right? I got pearl handle pistols and pearl boxed tefillin, So, God comes to this fellow and says to him, I want you to start the world all over again. I want you to go to this land. And now you get the promise on page 70. I will make of you a great nation. You're going to be a big nation. V'avarchecha, I will bless you. V'gad l'shimcha, I'll make your name great. You're going to be famous. What do you need to do for this? Only one thing. The next phrase is Hayeh bracha. The translation is it's not good because the translation says you will be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. The Hebrew is tzivui. It's a command form. I'll make you great. I'll make you famous. I'll make you powerful. You, for your part, you have to be a blessing. Now that's interesting because I know what it means to say a blessing. What does it mean to be a blessing? To be a blessing. I need blessing in the world, and I need a human being to carry it forward. And now everything that's important in the Bible is repeated. Okay, that's why rabbis are so redundant, right? I will bless those who bless you. That's cool. I will curse him who curses you. That's better. Put that on a bumper sticker. Don't you think that's a great bumper sticker, right? Right? And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. The Hebrew is actually upside down. It starts with a verb, v'nivrachu becha, and blessed in you, kol mishpachot ha'adama, will be all the families of the earth. All the families of the earth. So quickly, who is the recipient? Who is the beneficiary of Abraham's blessing work? The whole world. The whole world. So then that raises the following question. Is this a statement of Jewish particularity, of Jewish particularism, or is this a statement of Jewish universalism? And the answer is yes. He's being chosen. This is chosen. What is he being chosen to do? He's being chosen to be a blessing to the world. You can't separate Jewish particularism from Jewish universalism. You can't separate the two. Because the purpose of Jewish particularism is to send this people out into the world as a vessel of God's blessings to all the world. And you can't be a blessing to the whole world unless you have some deep sense of identity and connection to your own. This is the paradox or the dialectic of particularism and universalism. The purpose of being a Jewish people is to be a blessing to the world, and you can't be a blessing unless you have a deep sense of who and what you are, of why you're in the world. So this is the beginning. Now, what's interesting about this, and we've talked about this before, but it's important to reiterate it. The Bible knows you've read Joseph Campbell. The Bible knows that before you read the Bible, you read all of Joseph Campbell. And if you didn't read Joseph Campbell, so you at least watched him on television with Bill Moyers, right? And the Bible knows, I'll be with you a second, that you know, because Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell told you, that every world mythology has the same story. Every one. Every single one. Right? Mesopotamian mythology certainly has the story with some of these words in it. But so does Greek mythology and Roman mythology and Polynesian mythology and Navajo mythology and Aboriginal mythology. There's a God who chooses a man and says, you'll be my hero. I'll make you famous, I'll make you powerful, and together we will conquer the world. You will conquer the world for me. Every world mythology has that story, except one. This story says, God comes to him and says, I'm choosing you. And Abraham says, yeah, sure, all the gods do that, you know. And I'm going to make your name great. All the gods say that. And I will bless you. All the gods say that. The next line is, and together we will conquer the world. That's not what it says. What it says is, Hayeh bracha, be a blessing. You're not conquering anything. You're going to be a blessing to the world. That's what I need you to do. That's where this mythology is. It's consciously playing off of the other mythologies. It's consciously parodying the other mythologies. This is the way the Bible works. The Bible assumes that you are a literate reader. I mean, literate reader 3,500 years ago. So you know the mythologies of the world, and you're expecting this. Oh, I know what's going to happen next. I know. He's going to get blessed. Yes. And he's going to go out in the world as God's guy. Yes. And he's going to become a great and powerful people. Yes. And he's not going to conquer. He's going to bless. That's the difference. It's a play on a common cultural trope. That's what's going on. Be a blessing. Be a blessing. Now, what does it mean to be a blessing? How do you go about being a blessing? What does it take to be a blessing? That's what the rest of the story is going to be all about. That's where we're going. Yes, someone had a hand up. Hang on, wait, I'm sorry, Douglas. I apologize. Thanks, Doug.
This is what it says, that we are not racist. That is the point.
Yeah? We're not racist? Who said that? That was great. We're not? Well, look, the idea that we see the whole world as our responsibility, that's the aspiration. We should only behave that way. Amen. Okay, otherwise, the next thing I say, I'm going to get in trouble, so I should stop. Poo-poo. Now, what happens is this. So here is the story of Abraham getting chosen, and here is the story of Abraham starting out on the journey. Now, we're going to jump around a little bit, so I need your fingers. Ready? For a moment, just skip over the next couple of stories and come with me to chapter 15. Chapter 15. Yeah, which is on page 82. It's like this story stops, and now we have a bunch of other stuff. I promise you we'll come back to it because it's really interesting. But this narrative picks up again in chapter 15 on page 82. Sometime later, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Okay, so Abraham is talked to at the beginning, and now he gets a vision. Fear not, Abraham, I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great. And Abraham has an anxiety because he doesn't have any kids. So he says, what am I going to do? I'm going to die childless, and all I have is this guy, Eliezer of Damascus, living in my house. And he says, you've granted me no offspring. So the word of the Lord came and said, no. That one shall not be your heir. He took him outside. He took him outside. That's such a great phrase. So he must have been in the tent or something, right? Inside. He says, come on outside. Come on. I know it's late, and I know it's cold, but put on your slippers and come outside. Come with me, right? Look up. Look toward the heavens and count the stars, if you're able to count them. And God said, so shall your offspring be. And because he put his trust in the Lord, he reckoned to it his merit, right? He trusted God. And God said, I am the Lord who brought you out of the Ur of the Chaldees, assigned this land to you as a possession. And he said, O Lord, how shall I know that I'm to possess it? And they have a ritual now. It's the Brit Ben Abitarim. Take all these animals, split them in half. This weird thing happens. It's in a vision. So the question is, did this really happen, or is this all in a dream? Are we being reported what his dream was, right? And he says, I give you all of this land as yours. Now, skip chapter 16 and come with me to chapter 17, page 89. I promise you we'll come back. You're going to learn everything today. When Abraham was 99 years old, God appeared to him. It's about time, right? And said to Mort, when you were 99 years old, did God appear to you? That's why he has this beautiful smile on his face every Shabbos morning. I am El Shaddai. Walk in my ways and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you. I'll make you exceedingly numerous. Abraham threw himself on his face, which is not easy to do when you're 99. I want to point that with due respect, right? Right? And for you, 99 is a youngster, right? That's the sweet thing. Yeah, right. He interrupted his handball game, right? Right. And God spoke to him and said, as for me, this is my covenant. You will be the father of a multitude of nations, and you shall no longer be called Abram. Your name will be called Abraham, for I'll make you father. What is he doing? He's taking the stuff we learned in chapter 12, and he's elaborating on it. Right? I will make of you, in chapter 12 he was told, you will be Goy Gadol. You're going to be the father of a great nation. Now you're going to hear how it gets elaborated. Not just one, but many nations. Right? Many nations will come from you. I'll maintain my covenant between us, an everlasting covenant through the ages, to be God to you and your offspring to come. I assign the land to you sojourn, and the offspring to come, the land of Canaan. So there's two things that come of this: enormous fertility and the land of Canaan. You will have many, many nations that will be yours, and this land shall be yours. As for you, you and your offspring coming throughout the ages to my covenant. And now he gives them the sign of the covenant is going to be circumcision. And then Sarah gets blessed. She'll be the mother of many nations. And then Abraham threw himself, on page 92, Abraham threw himself on his face and laughed. And he said to himself, can a child be born to a man 100 years old? Can Sarah bear a child at 90? And God says, don't mess with me. Abraham said, oh, that Ishmael might live. And he says, nope, not Ishmael. You're going to get another kid. And that's how this starts. So what we have here is 3 episodes of covenanting. Do you see that? We have chapter 12, we have 15 and 17. We have the first major promise of the covenant. And then you have 2 elaborations of the covenant which emphasize 2 themes, or 3. One is protection. But the big themes are your fertility, and the land. These are the signs of the covenant. So far, so good? Everybody got that? Okay. What happens in between? That's what's so strange. So now we're going to get this really interesting set of stories. There's a set of narratives that filter in between these 3 covenantal promises. 3 covenantal promises. And I hope we have time to come back to these covenantal promises because they're important. But the stories that come in between are really strange. I just want to tell you this. Spent the whole week trying to figure this out. This really strange stories. Because in some ways, they completely contradict what you just read. Look at the very first one. So come all the way back with me to page 71. Chapter 12. Abraham went forth as the Lord commanded, and Lot went with him. Lot is his nephew. He has a brother, and his brother died, and Lot is the dead brother's son. Okay? Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarah and his brother's son Lot, and all the wealth that they had amassed and the persons they had acquired, and they set forth to the land of Canaan. And when they arrived in Canaan, Abraham passed through the land as far as Shechem and the terebinth of Moreh. Shechem is Nablus, and Moreh is in between, and the Canaanites were in the land. And now God says, I will assign this land to you. And Abraham built an altar, and he moved east to Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel and Ai. And Abraham journeyed south to the Negev. All right, so he's given the land. He is a semi-nomadic Bedouin. He brings his people and his flocks, and they come to Canaan, and they do a circuit around Canaan, roughly around the land of the West Bank, because that's where the grasslands are for the sheep. Okay? And that's how we start the story. Now, he was told what? I will make of you a great nation. I'll protect you. There was famine in the land. There's always famine in Israel for the same reason there's drought in California. There's no river. It's watered by rain. So what happens if you get a drought? You have a famine. If you have a famine, where do you go? You go to Egypt. Why do you go to Egypt? Because they have something we don't have. They have a river. Now, he could have gone back to Mesopotamia. It's interesting. Why didn't he go back to Mesopotamia instead to Egypt? That's an interesting question. So he goes down to Egypt to sojourn there. For the famine was severe in the land. And he was about to enter Egypt. He said to his wife Sarah, I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think, she's his wife, they're going to kill me and let you live. Say that you're my sister, that it'll be okay with me, and I'll remain alive. Oh, come on. I mean, come on. This is Abraham? I mean, this is like my hero? You know, this is Abraham, right? And what? Wait, it gets worse. He enters Egypt. The Egyptians did see how beautiful she was. By the way, if he's 75, how old is she? 65. A hot 65-year-old Jewish lady. Absolutely. Who said that? Absolutely. That's a beautiful thing. She said absolutely. And by the way, you're going to see in a moment, this isn't the only time this keeps happening. Anyway, Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh. I mean, so she catches the eye of of Pharaoh's people, right? So they tell Pharaoh, there's this hot Jewish lady in the market, right? So because of it, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's palace. And because of it, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, asses, male, female, slaves, she-oxes, and camels. What's all that?
The pimp fee.
It's what?
Pimp fee.
Well, the pimp fee, if you're being mean about it. What was Pharaoh's intention of sending all that wealth to Abraham?
A dowry.
It's not a dowry, it's a bride price. Dowry is what you give the girl. It's a bride price, right. It's a bride price. okay? Right? And so she gets all of this stuff, right? But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarah, the wife of Abram. Pharaoh sent for Abram and said, what the hell did you do? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? And how did he know it was God that was doing this to him? And so did she tell him? As they were getting ready for their boudoir, did she suddenly put her ring back on, and my husband, so somehow Pharaoh discovers the ruse, and Pharaoh says, why did you say she's my sister? So I took her as my wife. Here, she's your wife, take her and get the hell out of my country. And Pharaoh put men in charge of him, and they sent him off with his wife and all that he possessed. Like, take him to the border and kick him out, right? What a weird story, okay? That's weird story number one. Billy, you want to add something?
Why would Abraham?
Wait, stop.
Yeah.
Why would Abraham ignore God's edict that he was going to be, a maker of nations?
Yeah, God said to him, I'm going to take care of you and I'm giving you the land. So what does he do? He ignores the taking care of and he leaves the land. Yes, it's a weird story. I have a reason why it's here, but I think it's a weird story. We acknowledge it's a weird story, right? Okay, yes, please don't.
I think summing it all up, God for the first time find a man with logic who can deal with. And
Yeah.
this is all give and take.
Yeah, okay.
Even in the whole process, God throws certain situation where a human being with some logic how to react.
Okay. Except if I were writing a story about our patriarch, I would have written a different story. I mean, God gives him this. The beginning of Lech Lecha is like the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It opens with this trump, bum 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 bum, and you say faith, blessing, covenant, power, bum 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 bum. Abraham, hero, patriarch, dum bum 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 bum, and you're expecting this first movement of the symphony to be magnificent. And the first movement of the symphony is, what? You leave the land, run down to Egypt. As you're getting close to Egypt, all we're told is, he was afraid. He was afraid. So either he's afraid and he lies to protect his own tuchus and sends his wife into the boudoir of the Pharaoh, or he's pimping his old lady, right? Or, and by the way, just to make this perfectly clear so that you don't think I didn't see this, women and men will read this story differently. You could ask a really tough Me Too question about this story, which is, isn't it true that every husband does this at some point? That in every male-female relationship, men tend to use women for their own purposes? She becomes the trophy wife.
But we are talking about
He's
a man
using
of
her
35
instead of making her the
years ago.
partner. He's using her in some fashion. I mean, you could read this in a very interesting archetypical way. All right, Ellen.
So the other thing that I find interesting is the morality here is assigned to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Which we normally don't assign that to, and not to Abraham.
Pharaoh turns out to be a pretty good guy, because Pharaoh says, "What the hell did you do? Why did you tell me?" Right? What? Now I'll be with you a second. Okay, 1 second. Okay, take a look quickly, because this is too good to ignore. Take a look at chapter 20. I'll give you the page in just a second. Page 109. Put a finger here and come with me to page 109. Chapter 20 of Genesis. This is sometime later. Like later. Abraham journeyed there to the region of the Negev, and he settled between Kadesh and Shur. And while he was sojourning in Gerar, Abraham said of his wife, "She's my sister." And King Avimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. You Jewish men never learn. I mean, come on. I mean, again? You didn't learn the first, come on. But God came to Avimelech in a dream and said to him, You're going to die because of the woman you've taken. She's a married woman. And Abimelech had not approached her, the Torah says, and says, "O Lord, will you slay people even though they're innocent?" Right? Abimelech becomes God's righteous interrogator and says, "Yo, God, I haven't touched the woman. He told me it was his sister. You know, you can't do that. That's not just." Right? He himself said she's my sister. And she said he's my brother. When I did this, my heart was blameless, my hands were clean. So God says, okay, I know you did this with a blameless heart, so I kept you from sinning against me. That's why I did not let you touch her. Interesting. If you want to get into the physiology of this, it's kind of interesting because this is before Viagra was invented, right? Right? So that's why I didn't let you touch her. Therefore, restore the man's wife. He's a prophet, and he'll intercede for you. If you fail to restore, you're going to die, and all that's yours. So the next morning, Abimelech called his servant and told him all that happened, and the men were frightened, and he summoned Abraham, and he said, "What the hell did you do this for?" Right? "What wrong have I done to you that you should bring great guilt upon me in my kingdom? You've done this thing you have done to me things that ought not be done." Who is the moral hero in the story? It's Abimelech. Just like in the other story, it was, believe it or not, Pharaoh. In both stories, it's the non-Israelite who carries the moral message, who is the victim of the ruse and carries the moral message. So if you Jews are walking the world thinking you're the only righteous people in the world because you're covenanted, the Torah is going to tell you something right away. I mean, that one of the burdens of these two narratives is to say, don't think that just because you're covenanted, you're the only moral people on the planet. You're not the only moral people on the planet. There actually is a universal morality. And one of the tenets of universal morality is don't touch married women. And these guys are like serious about this. This is an offense. This is a serious offense. Right? Then Abimelech says, what was your purpose? And listen to Abraham on verse 11, on page 111. "I thought," said Abraham, "surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife." Yirat Elohim. Great phrase for you to know. Yirat Elohim means fear of God. Yirat Elohim is the phrase that's used all over the Bible whenever an Israelite confronts a non-Israelite over an issue of morality. Yirat Elohim is conscience. Yirat Elohim is common decency. Yirat Elohim is a common morality that's not based on revelation. God didn't teach this to us. It's basic fairness. It's Yirat Elohim. I'll give you 3 other examples. So this is one of the cases of Yirat Elohim. When Joseph is in his guise as the prime minister of Egypt, and he's talking to his brothers, but they think he's still the prime minister of Egypt, and he takes Benjamin, right? He says to them, "What, did you think there was no Yirat Elohim in this place?" Right? We have rules, we have laws, right? In the book of Leviticus, we have a series of laws. And they all end with the words Ani Adonai. This is not, and Adonai means our God. That's God. That's our personal God. But there's certain laws in Leviticus, in Kedoshim, that say because of Yirat Elohim. One of them is you rise before an elderly person. You don't curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind. That's Yirat Elohim. That's common decency. So the Bible has this notion of common decency, a universal morality that's not based on revelation. It's based on the very fact that you're a human being in the world with other human beings, and there's certain things we can expect of everybody. One of the things is don't touch a married woman. Don't mess with a married. That's what's here, right? That's one of the burdens of this narrative. All right, come back with me. So Ellen, you're right. In this case, Pharaoh and then Abimelech. Oh, and by the way, in case you're really a fan of this story, if you turn to Genesis 26, as long as you asked. Genesis 26, I'll give you the page. Page 149. If you turn to page 149, there was famine in the land, I told you. Aside from the previous famine that had happened in the time of Abraham. See, there's famine again. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar, Not the guy that Abraham went to, but his son, Abimelech II. Right? The Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt, stay in the land, reside in the land, I'll be with you, and I'll make your heirs numerous, etc. So page 150, Isaac stayed in Gerar, and when the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, she's my... You guys are incorrigible! You're incorrigible! So what happens? The men of the place, he thought, the men, they'll kill me on account of Rebekah. She's beautiful. When some time passed, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looking out of the window, saw Isaac. The word is mitzachek. It says fondling here, which is sweet. But mitzachek, they were fooling around. Fooling around, I think is like, with his wife Rebekah. Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, so she's your wife. The word shmuck doesn't appear here. But in some of the manuscripts, you'll find it here. Right? Or something worse, right? Why then did you say she's my sister? He says, I thought I might lose my life on account of this. He says, what have you done to us? One of us could have lain with your wife. So the third time it happens, she doesn't get taken into the palace. But Abimelech is worried. So what happens? We have three occasions when this scenario is played out, the same story. The first 2 times with Abraham, once with Pharaoh, once with Abimelech. The third time with Isaac. But the second and third times are with the same family. It's Abimelech the father and Abimelech the son. The third time, Abimelech the son doesn't take her into the palace. Dad must have left him instructions. If this Jew comes to your community and he has a cute wife and he says she's his sister, don't touch her. Because these guys have a problem, And he says, why do you keep doing that? Why do we have the same story 3 times? Isn't that weird? There's no other story in the Bible that's repeated 3 times. Same scenario. And each time you feel this sense of disappointment in the patriarch. Because he was fearful. His fear is ruling him. Each time it's the non-Israelite king who points out the morality of the situation. Right? Now there's some internal stuff that we'll take a look at in a second, but isn't this a strange scenario to keep happening? It's like, maybe this is what David said a moment ago, is that these patriarchs are not ready to put on the garb of patriarch. If I were telling stories about my ancestors, these aren't the stories I would tell. I would make them heroes and powerful and faithful men and women of pure faith. I mean, I could write the Jesus stories much easier. No, because he's perfect. He walks around there, he never does anything wrong. He's perfect. It's easy to write about a patriarch who's perfect. Here you get a very different sense. You get people who are not ready to be perfect. They're full of fear. They're full of smallness. There's a smallness to this. And you say, my God, that's where we started from? That's not who I want to be. I mean, I think one of the big burdens of the story, and I'll finish with this, I promise you, is this idea that one of the things is they assume there's no morality in the world. And each time what they're met by are kings, are leaders who say, you're not the only moral person on the planet. Look for us, we're your allies. I mean, it's a very interesting argument on behalf of a different moral vision of the world. All right, we've got a lot of questions, a lot of comments. Let's start over here. We'll work our way around. Yeah, Vlad, how you doing?
Hi, good.
Nice to see you.
So first of all, I think part of the reason why it keeps happening is because they've never had negative consequences from it. So
yeah, he gets rich the first time.
They get away with it.
Yeah, and he gets rich. He gets rich. He walks away with all of this stuff, consolation prizes,
right. The second thing I wanted to bring up was, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a lot of similarity between this story of going down to Egypt, being kicked out.
Yeah, okay. So you're going to see this in a second. So this is the punchline I was trying to get at, but you've now ruined it. It's okay. I love you. I'm glad you're here. Look what happens here. Just walk with me. Ready? The first story after the covenant is we go down to Egypt. One of us is taken captive by the Pharaoh, and it's only through God's intervention that we come free. And we come out, and there's a plague involved, right? There's a plague involved, and we come out with a lot of wealth. The next story, if you'll just follow with me, on page 74 is Abraham and Lot enter the land, and they divide the land. Lot goes one way, Abraham goes the other way. Division of the land. The next story on page 77, chapter 14, is a war with the kings of Canaan. Okay? So does this sound familiar to anybody? We go down to Egypt. One of us gets taken captive. God redeems us with plagues. We emerge with great wealth. We come back to Canaan. We fight a war in Canaan. At the end of the war, we divide the land. Some of us take some of the land. Some of us take some of the other part of the land. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Sorry? This is a foreshadowing of the Exodus.
Like a refrains in the symphony.
Yeah, yeah, right. Ma'aseh avot siman lebanim. That's what the Talmud says. The acts of the experience of the ancestors is a sign to the children, to the descendants of what's happening. This is a signaling of what's going to happen to us in the next generation. As if to say that Abraham is the archetype patriarch, and his experiences contain all of our experiences. He's going to go to Egypt. He's going to conquer the land. He's going to divide the land. He's going to settle in the land. He's going to make a covenant. That's what's coming in these stories. That, as I was reading these stories, that's the only reason I could figure out why you would put these stories here. Because they don't tell you what you think they're going to tell you. You would think that this would be a religious revelation where Abraham would gain a deep sense of what God wants of us, or that there would be great heroism and power, but it's not. It's these very human stories, but they're stories that are completely foreshadowing the experience of the Exodus generation. Okay? We got lots of questions. Douglas, help us around. Okay? Let's start over here and then. Yeah, hang on. I'm glad you're assertive.
The issue that I want to try, I have said it before, and somebody said whatever you say is correct, because neither of us was there.
In this
But
room,
it's not the
everyone
case.
is correct. It's good.
This is not the case.
Go ahead, talk to me.
Based on the circumstances that you once said, Abraham was trained by God
Yeah,
to follow his mission. So, as a wise person,
Yeah.
when he finds in a very sophisticated situation that he cannot find proper path, he goes through the process of elimination.
yeah,
He chooses one by one and says which one is not correct action to do.
yeah,
In this kind of situation, those who play poker, they give parole to the other opponents. So
Yeah, yeah.
in this way, Abraham gave parole to God. Let God decide about the issue.
yeah. It's just that, showing up in the Pharaoh's palace and saying, "This is my sister, not my wife," and accepting the wealth. I mean, there's something. You're right. I mean, he's trying to save himself, but it's just this sort of moral smallness to this that you wouldn't expect a hero's story to include. It's a very funny story, and it happens over and over again. Like, why does it keep happening to these guys? Right? Yes, please.
Yeah, it seems to me that the writers were very clever. Also, although they weren't psychologists, obviously.
Yeah.
They were psychologically very sophisticated.
Yeah, yeah.
And in terms of telling a story,
Right.
it's much easier to tell a story about a perfect leader who does no wrong.
Right.
But the identification of the reader is difficult.
Yeah.
Because we are not perfect.
Right.
Therefore, we look at this and say, how can we be like that?
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Yeah.
in these stories, we're dealing with imperfect leaders, and we say, look at the imperfections, look where they lead them, what can we learn based upon their imperfections in order not to repeat what they do?
Yeah.
Because there is a moral theme that runs through this, whether it's God or
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that here, but
But you said it in the right way. There's a moral theme, and that you have to learn the morality, because God's not going to rescue you from your own immorality.
Right. And this is, by the way, almost every other religious text
Yeah.
deals in perfection. The Indian mythologies don't, but most of them do.
Yeah.
They deal in perfection.
Yeah.
And this is an incredible chasm or a break
Yeah.
between that kind of storytelling and our kind of storytelling.
Yeah, and it's interesting, by the way, that there's a certain class of midrashim. If you read certain midrashim, what they tried to do is turn Abraham back into a perfect character again. They said, well, he had perfect faith that God was going to, and what as you pointed out, what they do is they flatten the moral horizon. They flatten the moral topography of his life, right? They make him all, just perfect, a man of perfect faith, rather than a guy who's living in the world and scared. I mean, the Pharaoh story is he's scared. Now, what he does is immoral or wrong, I guess. I mean, he's frightened. The other piece of it, by the way, just so that we fill in the gaps, is there's another piece of this, which is you're dealing with the confrontation of two civilizations. Abraham is a nomad. He's a Bedouin. He's a desert person. Pharaoh is urban. It's a city. When nomads approach cities, their question is, what's the morality of that place? There is an ethic of the desert. Abraham didn't have to do that ruse in the desert, because in the desert, no one would touch his wife. There is a common decency, Yirat Elohim in the desert, that you don't do that. But in the city, you never know. You never know. You don't know what you're getting in a city. And the Bible hates cities. Right? It hates cities because you can't count on the morality of the city the way that you can count on the morality of the desert. Right? I mean, the Bible says that the first city was created by Cain, because he needed a place to hide. I mean, just think about that for a minute, right? So this is a city dweller versus desert nomad confrontation, right? City dweller versus nomad confrontation, and the nomad says, I don't know how they treat people there.
What's going on behind the wall?
What's going on behind the wall? What's going on behind the mask? If you live in a tent, you have no privacy. And there's an ethic of tent livers about how you behave because there's no privacy. That's what it means to live in a tent. Means that everybody knows your business. But in a city, you can close and lock the door. It's a very interesting morality. It's an interesting moral play. Okay, we got some more comments. We haven't even gotten to the point of today's talk, so we're doing great. You're doing wonderfully. This is what the Torah is supposed to be about. Hello, Elaine.
This may be irrelevant, but
In this room, nothing is irrelevant.
there is a time where he says, yes, she is indeed my half-sister.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
reason-
in the Abimelech story, he says,
right. Abraham cops to it. He says, yeah, she's my half-sister.
yeah,
Okay. I don't know that that's important because she's mostly his wife.
yeah.
But wait, I want to make one comment more
Please,
that
please.
if in fact they are half siblings,
Yeah.
maybe that accounts for Isaac's personality, because he's not
His
supposed
passivity.
to
Yeah.
Passivity,
Yeah, and
yeah.
also because he's born late in her life.
Yeah.
And there are higher incidences of, birth issues of kids who are born much, much later. And she's 99 years old.
Okay, but once he claims her as his wife, she's no longer a sister. That's the way
Yeah. Now, Nachum Sarna, Alev Shalom, great Bible teacher at Brandeis University, who was my wife Nina's mentor. Nachum Sarna says the following. He says, we know from archaeological records that in certain Near Eastern civilizations of this period, a man could adopt his wife as his sister and elevate her status. You see, if you have women have statuses in this culture, okay? The lowest status is zonah, is a street prostitute, and then you have concubine, and then you have secondary wife, and then you have shifcha, and then you have wife, right? Wife has certain rights and privileges in a household, right? Vis-a-vis property and control. Sister has higher property, has higher status in a household. So it is possible for a man who truly loves his wife to elevate her to be a sister wife and have even higher status in the household and greater property rights upon his demise. You see, it's like rewriting your will, so your wife gets the stuff, so your good-for-nothing kids don't get it. And so what Sarna says is, Sarna proposes that when Abraham says she's my sister, he thought they understood that she's my sister wife. That she's not only my wife, she's my sister wife. She's my wife, of course she's my wife, but she has even higher value than any regular wife. He thought they understood that, but they don't speak Mesopotamian. They're Egyptian, they don't are not too bright, So they didn't understand that social convention and thought she was really his sister. And Nachum Sarna was the most gentle, kind, sweet man, and that was his way of describing the sexual politics of this story. He's probably wrong, but you got to give him credit because he's such a wonderful teacher of Torah. I mean, and a sweet, sweet soul. His son Jonathan is the most important authority on American Jewish history in the world right now, and a wonderful guy, wonderful teacher. Who has the microphone? Yes, please,
Actually,
Mrs.
my
Abrams.
question is why Sarah accepted this.
Oh, what's a wonderful question. So, why Sarah accepted it. So, ladies, gentlemen, here's what we need to do. We need to rewrite the whole Torah from the women's point of view. We have Torat Avraham here. Sarah, Sarah doesn't talk. Do you notice that, by the way? Abraham gets all this God talk. Sarah doesn't talk until next week. Sarah's going to talk. And when Sarah hears that she's going to be a mom, she says, "Are you kidding me? What, are you nuts? Have you seen my old man? Are you kidding?" And then God says, "Watch." But where is her personhood in this? Where is her authority? Where is her sense of herself? Okay? You get this, she'll talk when it comes to the Hagar story, which is coming too, but you don't get a sense of where is she in this? Where's her voice in this? And how would her voice be? So if she told the story, what would the story sound like? Would she tell it with anger? Would she tell it with pain? Would she tell it with resignation? Would she accept it as part of being married to the guy? I mean, first of all, the guy comes home. He's 75 years old. He comes home from work one day and says, "Pack your house, we're leaving." And she says, "Oh, wonderful. Where are we going? Beverly Hills, Miami Beach, New York City?" "No, we're going to Canaan." Canaan was a godforsaken, horrible place. It's like you were going to Libya. Why would you go to Canaan? What did she think of that? What did she think of that? I mean, then she goes with him, and then he takes her down to Egypt and puts her through this ordeal. Somebody write me this story. I mean, you're all wonderful writers. Write me this story. I want to know what emotions she would attach to this story. We'll get to him in a second. Yes, please.
That was part of my question, but I like your explanation better than Rabbi Sarna's because it gives an explanation of a text that does not exist in Torah.
Yeah.
Same thing as the woman's, as the wife's role in the Torah that doesn't exist. And, even with going to take Isaac for sacrifice is another huge thing that he doesn't talk to Sarah about.
Yeah. It's a hell of a marriage, don't you think? It's a very interesting marriage about what the dynamics of this marriage are about. Yes, please.
We have to remember that in those days, women did not have any rights. They were property of their husbands. Only later on in the Torah, there are some rights given to the woman and how to respect them and so on.
Well, they do have a voice. It's interesting where their voices are heard. And what happens is as we go through the Torah, they get more voice. You'll see this now. Sarah has a very small voice, and Rebecca has a much bigger voice, right? Rachel and Leah will have a big voice, and as I gave a very long sermon on Yom Kippur, Tamar changes all of Jewish history, right? So we'll see where their voices, where they find expressivity, where they find assertiveness. You're right, of course. It's a very patriarchal. So that's why I'd love somebody write me the story of how does Sarah experience this? Yes, please.
Yeah, so in 1423, after the war, and King Sodom is saying to Abraham, "I'll give you, all of the spoils," and Abraham dares to take the high ground. "I will not take so much as a thread or sandal strap of what is yours, for you shall not say, 'It is I who made Abram rich.'" Well, who made Abram rich?
Yeah. His wife.
Yes. And the point is, women, did he say, "Well, my wife my wife, my wife made me rich.
Yeah.
You're not going to say that. So women's voices are completely, and their contributions and their power is completely silenced.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so here's what I need you to do. I need you to rewrite that story in Sarah's voice. No, seriously. When Abraham says, "Tell him you're my sister," how does she respond? Then she gets taken into Pharaoh's palace. Now, we don't know what happens in Pharaoh's palace. But the next scene is that a plague comes upon Pharaoh's palace, and Pharaoh has figured out that she's his wife. So what has she told Pharaoh, right? What was their conversation, right? What did Pharaoh do to her or with her? Did they have relations? I mean, it's an interesting question. Was that the plague? So there's all kinds. It's a really, and then I want to know the feelings of this. I want to know, does a wife, even in a culture which completely suppresses women's selfhood, has she no selfhood left? Or is there some spark of herself which says, no, this is wrong? I mean, the idea that she goes along and goes along and goes along, you could construct a scenario where she goes along, but in the bedchamber when Pharaoh comes at her, she says, stop, I'm the man's wife. Right? I mean, and whether something's born in her, and whether what's born in her is then born out as she develops, as their relationship continues, I think there's a really good novel to be written here. I really think about the development of her voice and her personhood. But I think that the purpose of these stories, just to finish, and then I'll get Andy's comment, the purpose of these stories is to foreshadow the experience of the coming generations, because they match up perfectly. The captivity of Egypt, the liberation from Egypt, the conquest of the land, the division of the land. This is exactly going to be the experience. And then the Parsha, the Torah portion, ends with this proclamation, a double proclamation of the of covenant, first in 15 and then in 17. There's one last thing I want to point out about that covenant thing, but Andy had a question. Yeah. I'm sorry. Then Andy. Okay. Hey.
So if I was going to write this story, I would say that Sarah and Abraham were in this together.
And
that the agency that...
It's a con. Sarah and...
And that the agency that we're assuming she doesn't have because she's Abraham's property, the two of them live in this Bedouin culture. They're going there. They don't care about ripping off whether it's Avimelech or Pharaoh.
Yeah.
But they won't rip off the guy who is their neighbor because they do have that sense of honor. But it's within their, what you call that Bedouin culture.
Yeah.
And that their relationship, because they don't have children, it's one that's a very tight-knit relationship. They're not doing it for, they're not stuck together because they have to take care of the kids until they go to college. They're together. They love each other. So that would be my story.
I got a better one. I want to go one more step. It was all her idea. They're coming into Egypt. And he is this not too bright man.
I would not say that.
Yes, not too. He is faithful, sweet, good, kind, but that's not how it. And she says, listen, tell him you're my, and I'll go in, and then, and it was all her idea.
Not saying that,
Right.
That's your novel.
Oh, that would make a good movie. That would Scarlett Johansson as Sarah, and I need it like Jake Gyllenhaal as Abraham, and Adam Driver as Abraham. You like that? Yeah, you need someone, and then you need someone as Pharaoh, someone who's sexy. What? Yeah, somebody a little older, a little. All right, we got this. We got this. All right, one more thing. Yes, Andy, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'm having fun.
I know you are. A competing narrative, however, is the fact that what is the relationship really between Sarah and Abraham? You think of it in terms of the Akedah story.
Yeah. What is the relationship between them? And what's so odd is that the relationship, again, the Torah typically tells you what characters do, and sometimes what characters say, but it doesn't tell you what characters feel. You have to fill that in. And you're seeing the outside of the character, but not the inside of the character. Even, the Akedah is the best example. You don't have a clue what Abraham's feeling. And you can fill in 100 different Abrahams into that story. depending on how you imagine the hero in that story. In these stories as well, you get this scene, for example, where Sarah comes and gives him the maid. Now, you could do this in ancient Near Eastern law. You could give a woman had a shifcha, was a second wife. It's called handmaid, but it's a secondary wife, and she could bear children who would then become the master's children. Jacob is going to have not 2 but 4 wives, the 12 sons of Jacob, right? 6 of them are born to Leah, right? 2 are born to Rachel. The others are born to the shifchot, to Bilhah and Zilpah, right? So then they become full sons of Jacob. So when Hagar is given to, when Sarah gives Hagar to Abraham, you see what they do, but you don't feel what they feel. You have to fill that in. And you don't feel, and the Torah takes some pains actually to, if you take a look at page 86, right? Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. Lo yilda lo. It's interesting. That's an interesting phrase, by the way. Born him no children. Right? Lo yilda lo. You hear lo? The first lo is with an aleph, which means didn't, and the second lo is with a vav, meaning him. Right? So she wants to give him a child. She wants to fulfill her role as his wife. That's how she defines herself, right? She had an Egyptian maidservant, Shifcha. Now, maidservant does not mean the lady who cleans your kitchen. She's a secondary wife, a wife from a lower social class, in this case, from another ethnic group, okay, whose name was Hagar. Sarah said to Abram, right? Sarah said to Abram, Hinena, it says look in Hebrew, but Hinena means here, right? Atzarni Adonai miledet, God has kept me from bearing a child. Right? Bona el shifchati, come to my shifcha, to my maid. Perhaps I will have a son through her. Okay? And look at the next couple of words, right? Right? Vayishma Avram lekol Sarai. So it's 4 words. Vayishma, you could have said that phrase in 3 words. You could have said, Vayishma Avram Sarai. He listened to Sarah. He obeyed Sarah. But they add the word kol. He heard the voice of Sarah. So right away the Midrash says, yeah, because he heard her voice. What didn't he hear? Her heart. He didn't hear a woman whose heart is breaking. He didn't hear a woman who feels like she is a failure. He didn't hear the woman's anguish, her pain. And look, even today, I got to tell you, because I know lots of women, I have a lot of friends who have gone through fertility and infertility and this kind of stuff. It's not easy. It's really, really hard. It's an emotional crisis in the life of a woman and a family when she wants to have a kid and can't get pregnant. So he doesn't hear her. He just hears what she said, and then he goes and does it. Right? There's no like, give me a hug. There's no like, let me respond. Interesting. This is the Torah reading for Rosh Hashanah first day. And the Haftorah, the prophetic section, is the first chapter of the book of Samuel, in which you have a similar scenario where a guy named Elkanah has a wife named Penina who can't have a kid, Achana who can't have a kid, and Elkanah responds to her emotionally. He says, I know that I love you more than I'd love 7 sons. I mean, he's a great husband. Abraham, not so much. So their relationship is very complicated. It's only when she dies that he cries for her. In Chaye Sarah, in 2 weeks, she's going to die. I'm sorry. But she's going to... I gave it away, damn. She dies, and he cries, and you say, what is he crying for? He never had any response to her all of these years. I mean, the guy who pimped her out twice, first to the fair. Now he's crying? Where was he crying before? I mean, so there's a novel to be written here. You really got to write this novel. Well, yeah. And the tradition is it's with a woman named Keturah. He's 111 years old, and he has 110 years old, and he has 10 more kids. Mort, you're interested? You're almost there. I mean, take a look with me. I want to finish today. I want to show you just one.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, of course. Yes.
I'm stuck with the part that God told Abraham,
Yeah.
be a blessing for the world.
Yeah, good.
So is it possible that we can somehow relate what he did?
Yeah.
Of saying that she's my sister.
Yeah.
To waking up that part of those people to be conscious when they're getting.
That's a beautiful
person.
midrash. That's a lovely midrash. I wish it were true. It's a beautiful midrash.
But we cannot relate it to that because
No, you can. I said it's a beautiful midrash, right?
It's our job to be a blessing to the world.
Yeah, I just wish it would come without so much suffering. That's the problem. You know, Sarah gets kidnapped here. So let's. All right, Pop. Yeah.
What's the purpose of this chapter?
What's the purpose of this chapter?
You were going to tell us the purpose of this whole section.
Well, the section is to give you a glimpse of the later experience. That Abraham's experience contains the experience of his children, the Egyptian captivity, the liberation, the conquest of the land, and the settling of the land. That was all part of Abraham's initial experience. That's number one. Number two, I think Michael's observation, which is, you take a human being and God says, I'm going to make him my partner in the world. No one's ready for that. It takes a good deal of life to grow into that role. By next week, he'll be there. You'll see it. But he's growing into that role. And what we're presented with at the beginning is not a guy who's a Superman. You're presented with a guy who's filled with the fears and the anxieties and the deficiencies that all of us are filled with, right? And the question is, can you take that man with all of his deficiencies, his moral and his personal deficiencies, and make him a partner of God, and make him a vessel of blessing in the world? That's the great question. That's what I think the Bible is deeply trying to work out. Okay? One more point. Yes, if you need to. Yes.
The word lekol.
Yeah.
I think it emphasizes what it says before. Atzarani Adonai miledet.
Yeah.
It did not move him. He didn't show any emotion.
Right, that's the thing. He plays patriarch and doesn't play husband. He's not sensitive to her soul. He's not sensitive to what he's done. So the question is, can you make that man into a partner of God? Right? You know, if God had chosen a Superman, it'd have been a different story. But you start with an ordinary man. Can you make an ordinary man into a partner of God? That's a great question. Let's take one more look at something. Just one more look, okay? There's 3 different statements of covenant in this parsha, right? In chapter 12, right? I will make of you a great nation. I'll bless you. I'll make your name great, and you will be a blessing. All the nations of the earth bless themselves in you. What does Abraham have to do to earn that? Be a blessing. It doesn't give you any more detail than that. Just be a blessing, right? In chapter 17, which is on page 89, right? Abraham was 99. I am El Shaddai. Walk in my ways and be blameless. I don't know if blameless. Heye tamim. Tamim means to be honest, yashar. It's simple. Don't be so complicated. It's not holy. It's not kedoshim. Sorry? Complete. Yeah. Be whole. But it's not kedoshim. It's not. And I don't expect you to be. But again, it's a sort of general kind of thing, right? And I'm going to give you all of this stuff. And your kids are going to inherit it. Your children and those after you will inherit all of this blessing. In Genesis, typically, the covenant and the blessings of covenant are inherited not by what we do, but who we are. We are Abraham's descendants. Therefore, we inherit Abraham's status and his blessings. Okay? Turn for a moment to page 437. Exodus. The book of Exodus has a different perspective. Okay? This is Moses on Mount Sinai. And God says to Moses on Mount Sinai on page 437, which is Exodus 19, verse number 3 and 4, right? Thus you'll say to the house of Jacob, declare to the children of Israel. This is God speaking to Moshe. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Look at verse 5. Now, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine, but you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. What's the difference between the covenant of Genesis and the covenant of Exodus? The word, what word? If. The word if. Okay? This is an observation that was made beautifully by my dear friend Yossi Klein Alevi and my teacher Daniel Hartman. Genesis says, I'm blessing you. Be good, but I'm blessing you. And your children will inherit this, whatever they are. Because they're your children, they will inherit this. Okay? Exodus says, if you obey my covenant, if you live up to my standards, if you fulfill my expectations, you will have this special status in the world. There are Genesis Jews and there are Exodus Jews. Genesis Jews are, because I'm a Jew, this is my identity. Jewish is what I am. Jewish is what I am. Exodus is, Jewish is what I do. Jewish is what I do. My identity is made up of a way of living, of a moral, religious culture. And because I do it, I am a Jew. Exodus Jews emphasize the culture, the way of doing Jewish in the world. If a person does Jewish in the world, they're Jewish. And if a person gives up doing Jewish in the world, they're not Jewish. Genesis says, you're Jewish no matter what. You're part of the family. You're part of the family. As a precursor to Wednesday night's discussion, which model welcomes outsiders? Genesis or Exodus? Exodus. Yeah, Genesis says you're part of the family. What if you're not part of the family? Can you join the family? Yeah, but you're always going to be a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law. You know what a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law is, right? Yes. He said, oh, yes. You know, in my parents' house, I took off my shoes and put my feet on the coffee table. In my in-laws' house, I sat quietly with my shoes on the floor, right, and my shoes on my feet and my feet on the floor, and I said, excuse me, Mr. Bieber, sir, may I have a glass of milk? And after 2 years of being married to his daughter, he said, get your own goddamn glass of milk, stop calling me sir, right? I mean, they tried to welcome, they did, they welcomed me as a child, but even then, you sit at the table and you're quite part of, you're sort of part of the family. The blessings come because you're part of the family. Being part of the family is what matters.
Only if you stood to my daughter.
Exodus, yeah. But so you're an Exodus mother-in-law. Exodus says you've got to obey in a certain way, right? These are two different models of Jewishness, and they divide the Jewish world. Rather interestingly, by the way. Who is the greatest modern Genesis Jew? Theodor Herzl. Because he said, our responsibility is to save the Jewish people. Right? Theodor Herzl didn't speak a word of Hebrew. Said we have to save the Jewish people, get them out of Europe, put them in their own state. What the nature of that state would be, Herzl couldn't care less. As long as we save the Jewish people, we have a responsibility to each other simply because we're of the same family. Genesis Jews. Who is the great modern Zionist Exodus Jew? Achad Ha'am, who said the purpose of Zionism is to create a new Judaism that modern Jews can imbibe and find meaning in. If we create a state that just happens to be a place where Jews live, then we haven't done anything. It has to be a place which creates a new way of doing Jewish in the world, right? There are Jews who say, I'm looking out for the Jewish people. That's my job, to defend the Jewish people, no matter what. And I'll do whatever it takes to defend the Jewish people. And there are those who say, if you have to compromise the deepest values of the Jewish tradition in order to save the Jewish people, that's not a bargain. We have to live up to the ideals and values of the Jewish people, right? Who's going to be more critical of Israel? Who's going to demand what of Israel? Who's going to give? It becomes a really interesting division in our community. Genesis Jews and Exodus Jews, right? We'll continue this next week. Let's have a good Shabbos. Take care. Nice to see you, man. Cynthia, you okay? I'm watching you there. I'm watching you. Neil is a doctor. Chaim is a doctor, right? I got, there's a couple